A man's voice cut through the damp air of the Hunavatten Thingstead in the summer of 1012. The argument was over a silver brooch, a small thing, really, but it had festered. A Kettle, a farmer known more for his temper than his wealth, stood across from Bjarni, a man whose land bordered his own. Words had been traded all morning. They started as grumbles about stray sheep and became accusations of theft. Now, Ketil's face was red. He took a breath, and the word he chose was not just an insult. It was a legal trigger he called Bjarni Rhaegar. The crowd went silent. The law speaker, Snorri, who had been listening with half an ear, now stood perfectly still. This was not a simple name-calling. The Old Norse word Rhaegar and its cousins Arg and Ergi meant something specific and deeply offensive. It accused a man of being unmanly, of taking the receptive role in a relationship with another man. In a society built on a rigid code of honor, strength, and masculine roles, this was the ultimate accusation. It was an attack on a man's very essence. According to the laws of the land, specifically the Grey Goose Laws, or Gragas, a collection of laws from the Icelandic Commonwealth, this was not just slander. It was a fultra sword, a word that carried the full penalty. The law was clear. A man accused of ergi in this way had the legal right to kill his accuser on the spot. He didn't need to wait for a trial or a duel. The accusation itself was considered an act of violence so severe that a violent response was not just permitted, it was expected. If Bjarni let the insult stand, he would be seen as accepting it. His honor would be gone. His standing in the community, his ability to trade, to lead his household, all of it would crumble. Bjarni's hand went to the hilt of the short sword at his belt. He had 3 heartbeats to decide. In that moment, the word was more dangerous than any weapon. It was a spoken challenge that demanded a physical answer. This was the world of Old Norse insults. They were not casual slurs. They were verbal weapons crafted to attack a person's honor, their place in society, and sometimes to legally justify their death. Number 20, a fool thinks he is safe inside his own home. The word was Heimsker. It literally meant home staying. Today, we might think of a homebody, someone who likes a quiet night in. But in the 10th century, it was a sharp insult. It meant you were foolish, naive, and ignorant of the wider world because you never left your own little corner of it. To be called Heimsker was to be called a simpleton who knew nothing of how the world really worked. Ulf Ragnarsson was a young farmer in the year 995. He lived in the Trondheim Fjord region of Norway. His father had been a raider, a man who had seen Miklagard, the great city of the Byzantines, and brought back silk and silver. But Ulf had no interest in that life. He loved his land. He knew the soil, the seasons, the way the wind smelled before a storm. His farm was small, but well kept. His 2 cows were fat, and his small patch of barley usually gave a decent yield. He was content. His neighbor was a man named Eric Bloodaxe. Eric was not the famous king of the same name, but he liked the sound of it. He was a restless man who had spent 5 years on a longship raiding the coasts of what is now England. He came back with scars and a few silver arm rings, but no land of his own. He rented a small plot from the local chieftain and looked with envy at Ulf's tidy farm. One afternoon, Eric came to Ulf with a proposition. He wanted to buy one of Ulf's cows. He offered Ulf a handful of foreign-looking silver coins. They were small and thin, not the hefty Arabic dirhams or solid Norse silver that Ulf was used to. Ulf looked at the coins. He didn't recognize the markings. "What are these?" he asked. Eric laughed, a loud barking sound. "That's English silver, you fool. Worth twice its weight in your clumsy local stuff." Ulf was cautious. I don't know this money. I would prefer an arm ring or goods." Eric's smile vanished. He leaned in close. "You wouldn't know real wealth if it bit you, would you? You just sit here on your little patch of dirt and watch your grass grow. You are Heimsker, Ulf, a home-staying fool. You have no idea what the world is or what things are worth." The word hung in the air. Eric was not just calling Ulf ignorant, he was calling him irrelevant in a culture that valued experience, travel, and the worldly knowledge gained from seeing far-off lands. Heimsk was a dismissal. It meant you were not a man of consequence. Your opinion on anything beyond your own fence was worthless. Ulf felt a flush of shame and anger. He was proud of his farm. He was proud of providing for his small family. But Eric's word made him feel small. It made his life's work seem petty and insignificant. He refused to sell the cow. The argument got louder. Eric pushed Ulf, calling him a heimsker again for all to hear. The insult was a social weapon. It painted Ulf as a man out of his depth, a man who couldn't be trusted in any serious dealing because he was too simple to understand the complexities of the world. It was an attempt to undermine his standing among his neighbors, to make him seem like a lesser man than the well-traveled Eric. The sting of that word, heimsker, stayed with Ulf for a long time. It was a reminder that in his world, a closed mind was as bad as a weak sword arm. Number 19, a man who breaks an oath is already a ghost. The term was niddinger. There is no simple English translation. It meant villain, scoundrel, oathbreaker, a person without honor. To be declared a niddinger was the social equivalent of a death sentence. It stripped you of all your rights, of your very humanity. You became a pariah, someone who could be shunned, robbed, or even killed without consequence. It was the worst thing a man could be. The story of Hrafmenkel Freysgodi from the sagas shows the weight of this concept. Hrafmenkel was a powerful chieftain in Iceland in the early 10th century. He was a devout man dedicated to the god Freyr. He owned a magnificent stallion named Freyfaxi, which he loved more than any other living thing. He swore a solemn oath that he would kill any man who rode the horse without his permission. A young man named Einar, who worked for Hrafmenkel, was sent to round up some sheep. He couldn't find them on foot. In a moment of desperation, seeing Freyfaxi in the pasture, he made a fatal mistake. He mounted the horse and rode it hard all day, finding the lost sheep. When he returned, the horse was sweaty and covered in mud. Hrafkenkel learned what had happened. His oath had been violated. He was bound by his own word. He confronted Einar, and despite the young man's pleas for forgiveness, Hrafkenkel killed him. This act, while brutal, was seen as him upholding his honor. But the story didn't end there. Einar's family, led by his father Thorbjorn, sought justice. It was an impossible task. Hrafmenkel was a powerful chieftain. Thorbjorn was a man of little means. They took the case to the Althing, the Great Assembly of Iceland. Through clever legal maneuvering by their kinsman, Sam, they managed to get Hrafmenkel convicted. The sentence was full outlawry. Hrafmenkel was declared a niddinger. Suddenly, the world turned upside down. The powerful chieftain was now nothing. His property was forfeit. His men owed him no loyalty. Sam and his followers rode to Hrafmenkel's farm. They dragged him from his home. They didn't kill him, but they subjected him to a deep humiliation. They tortured him and his men and then cast him out, forcing him to build a new life in a desolate valley with nothing. The power of the word niddinger was absolute. It wasn't just an insult. It was a legal and social mechanism. When Hrafmenkel was declared a niding, he ceased to exist as a member of society. His honor was gone. He was a man without a place, a ghost walking among the living. The insult didn't just hurt your feelings, it erased your identity. It showed that in the Norse world, your word, your oath, was the foundation of your existence. Break it, and you were nothing. Number 18, your stomach is as weak as your word. The insult was rakmagi. This translates roughly to wretch, gut, or scrawny guts. It was an insult aimed at a person's physical weakness and poverty. In a time when life was hard and starvation was a real threat, being strong and well-fed was a sign of success and competence. A rakmagi was someone who was failing at the basic task of survival. It implied they were too weak to work, too poor to eat, or too inept to manage their own affairs. Imagine a trading post like Kopang in Norway around the year 890. It was a bustling place filled with merchants from as far away as Francia and the Caliphate. A man named Leif had just arrived. He was a farmer from a poor coastal settlement. A bad fishing season followed by a wet harvest had left his family with little to eat. He was thin, his clothes were patched, and he had brought his only surplus goods to trade a few bundles of cured fish and a roll of coarse woolen cloth woven by his wife. He approached a stall run by a large, well-fed merchant named Kark. Kark sold iron tools, a luxury Leif could barely dream of. Leif offered his goods in exchange for a new axe head. Kark looked at the fish, then at Leif, his eyes scanning the man's gaunt frame. Kark sneered. Is this a joke? This pathetic pile of fish for one of my Frankish steel axe heads? Leif stood his ground. It is good fish, cured well, and the cloth is strong. Kark laughed and slapped his own large belly. Strong, look at you! You look like you haven't eaten in a month. You are a hrakmagi, a wretch gut. A man who cannot even feed himself tries to trade with me. Your goods are as weak as your body. Go beg for scraps somewhere else. The insult cut deep. It wasn't just about Leif's appearance. It was an attack on his ability as a man, a farmer, and a provider. Kark was saying that Leif's physical condition was proof of his failure in all aspects of life. In front of the other merchants and customers, Leif was publicly shamed. His poverty was turned into a moral failing. The other traders watched. No one stepped in to defend Leif. The insult had marked him. A Rakmagi was not someone you wanted to do business with. If he couldn't manage his own stomach, how could he be trusted to deliver on a deal? The word was a brutal piece of social sorting. It separated the haves from the have-nots, the successful from the struggling. For Leif, it was a bitter reminder that in a world where strength was survival, a hungry stomach was an open invitation to contempt. He left the market that day with his fish and his shame, the word Hakmagi echoing in his ears. Number 17, he is a wolf in a holy place. The Old Norse word was varg. It meant wolf, but it carried a much heavier meaning. A varg was an outlaw, a criminal, someone cast out from society. This was not a poetic metaphor. It was a legal status. A person declared a varg was literally dehumanized. The law codes, like the Norwegian Gulating law, stated that an outlaw was a wolf in sacred places. He had no rights. He could be killed by anyone, anywhere, without penalty. His property was seized, his family was forbidden from helping him. To be a varg was to be hunted. The story of Grettir the Strong, one of Iceland's most famous outlaws, is the story of a varg. Grettir was a difficult man, immensely strong, but with a terrible temper. In the early 11th century, a series of his actions, some accidental, some intentional, led to him being declared an outlaw by the Althing. And he was sentenced to 20 years of outlawry, the longest sentence ever passed. For 2 decades, Grettir lived as a varg. He could not live on a farm or in a town. He had to hide in the desolate volcanic highlands of Iceland. He lived in caves and remote huts. He stole sheep to survive. He was constantly on the run from bounty hunters as there was a price on his head. The insult, varg, was not something you casually called someone. It was a formal declaration. But the spirit of the word, the idea of being a destructive force outside the bounds of community, was powerful. Imagine a dispute between 2 neighbors. One might say, "You act like a varg, taking what is not yours, respecting no boundaries." It was an accusation that the person was behaving like an outlaw, that they were a danger to the community and did not deserve to be part of it. Grettir's life shows the reality behind the word. He was utterly alone. The sagas tell of his loneliness and his fear of the dark. Even this mighty hero was broken by the social isolation of being a varg. He was no longer a man, a member of a family or a community. He was a wolf, a predator to be hunted down. His only human contact was often with those who sought to kill him for the bounty. When someone in the Norse world was called a varg, it was the ultimate threat of exclusion. It meant you were no longer one of us. You are a wild thing, an enemy. We will not help you. We will not trade with you. We will hunt you. The word carried the full weight of the law and the terrifying prospect of being cast out into the wilderness to live and die like an animal. Number 16, you are a fool living in filth. This insult is a masterpiece of specificity, sarbilus foley. It breaks down into sore filth, dung, muck, billy, dwelling, farmstead, and foley fool. Dungstead fool. This wasn't a general insult about someone's intelligence. It was a targeted attack on their competence, their honor, and their very lifestyle. It accused them of being an idiot who lived in their own filth. In the Norse world, a farm was not just a place to live. It was the measure of a person. A well-run farm, clean and orderly, was the sign of a respectable, hard-working, and honorable family. A dirty, neglected farm was a sign of laziness, incompetence, and low social standing. A person's home was a direct reflection of their character. The scene is a local assembly, a thing, in southern Iceland around 970. Two farmers, Skapti and Grim, are in a dispute over a piece of pasture land. Grim is known for his sharp tongue. Skapti is a quiet man, but his farm has seen better days. His fences are sagging, and a pile of manure sits too close to his longhouse. Grim stands before the assembly and makes his case for the land. He speaks well. Then he turns his attention to Skapti. "And who is it that disputes my claim? Skapti Thorleikson, a man whose own farmstead stinks so badly that the crows flying over it fall from the sky. He cannot even manage his own land, yet he wants a piece of mine. Why should we listen to this Sarbilus foley?" The insult hits its mark. A ripple of snickers goes through the crowd. Grim hasn't just called Skapti a fool. He has painted a vivid, humiliating picture. He has connected Skapti's alleged foolishness to physical, verifiable evidence, the state of his farm. He is telling everyone that Skapti is not just dumb, but lazy and unclean. He lacks the basic competence to maintain his own household, which was a fundamental duty for a freeman. This insult was devastating because it was public and specific. It wasn't a vague slur. It was an accusation that other people could confirm with their own eyes. They could walk past Skapti's farm and see the dung heap and the broken fences. It undermined Skapti's credibility in the land dispute and in all future matters. How could his word be trusted on matters of law and property when he lived in squalor? The Sarbilus foley was a social outcast, not because he was evil, but because he was incompetent and undignified, a man who couldn't even master his own small world. The insult didn't just attack his mind, it attacked his home, his work, and his place in the community. In number 15, the bark of a dog is more fearsome than your blade. The word is hunder, dog. It seems simple, almost childish to us, but in Old Norse society it was a potent insult. It wasn't about the loyalty or companionship we associate with dogs. To call a man a hunder was to debase him. It implied he was base, servile, and without honor. It could also mean he was a coward or a creature of low cunning. It was a way to strip a man of his dignity and place him at the bottom of the social ladder. The setting is the aftermath of a sea battle in the Irish Sea around the year 937. A Norse ship has been captured by a rival crew. The defeated chieftain Ivar is brought before the victor, a man named Olaf. Ivar's crew is disarmed and kneeling on the deck. Olaf circles Ivar, looking him up and down. Ivar had a reputation as a fierce warrior, but his ship was outmaneuvered and his men were overwhelmed. Olaf wants not just to defeat Ivar, but to humiliate him completely. "So this is Ivar the Bold," Olaf says, his voice dripping with contempt. "I heard tales of your ferocity. I was expecting a wolf. Instead, I find a whimpering cur." He kicks a discarded shield near Ivar's feet. You fight like a dog, snapping at the heels of your betters, and now you kneel like one, waiting for a scrap from my table." He leans down so his face is close to Ivar's. "You are a hunder, Ivar. A dog, nothing more. Your men are a pack of dogs. I will put collars on you all and make you serve me." This insult was designed to break a man's spirit. A Norse warrior's identity was built on his freedom, his pride, and his reputation. To be called a hunder was to be told you were no better than an animal, a piece of property, It implied a master-servant relationship, which was the ultimate shame for a free man. It was also an attack on his courage. Olaf is saying Ivar's fighting was not the noble combat of a warrior, but the frantic, cowardly snapping of a cornered dog. For the captured crew, hearing their leader so thoroughly debased was devastating. It shattered their morale. The insult was a tool of psychological warfare. By turning their respected chieftain into a hunter in their eyes, Olaf was destroying the social structure of the crew and making them easier to control. The word was not just an angry sound, it was a carefully chosen term to enforce a new hierarchy of power, placing the victor as the master and the vanquished as his dogs. Number 14, he is a man with the heart of a mare. There was a specific term for this, Hester. It means horse or stallion. This might not sound like an insult. Horses were valuable, strong, and respected, but the context was everything. To accuse a man of being a horse, specifically in a receptive role, was a form of ergi, the grave, unmanly insult. It was another way of calling someone ragger, but with a specific animalistic and deeply humiliating image attached. This kind of insult was so serious, it was rarely spoken lightly. It was the sort of accusation that appeared in formal curses or skaldic poetry designed to inflict maximum damage on an enemy's reputation. The poet Cormakur Ogmundarson in the 10th century used this kind of imagery in a poetic duel. He and his rival, Steingirder's husband, traded verses that were filled with these kinds of potent, honor-destroying insults. Imagine a scene in a chieftain's hall. Two skalds, or poets, are competing for the chieftain's favor. One skald, Gunnar, has just performed a poem praising the chieftain's victories. The other, Halbjorn, is his bitter rival. Halbjorn stands up, a smirk on his face. He begins his own poem, but instead of praising the chieftain, he turns his words against Gunnar. He doesn't directly call Gunnar a name. Skaldic poetry was more complex than that. He uses kennings, metaphorical compounds. He might say something like, "The shield-bearer trembles, not from the clash of swords, but like a mare in the spring pasture, waiting for the stallion." The meaning would be crystal clear to everyone in the hall. Halbjorn is accusing Gunnar of being unmanly, of being like a female horse. You know, it's a devastating public attack. He is using the art of poetry, a respected skill, to deliver an insult of the highest order. The reaction in the hall would be electric. Some might laugh uncomfortably, the chieftain would frown, and Gunnar's face would turn pale with rage. This was not a joke. This was nid, a legally actionable form of slander. According to the Grey Goose laws, creating a verse that implied a man was ergi was a crime punishable by outlawry. While Halbjorn was playing with fire, Gunnar would be forced to respond. He could challenge Halbjorn to a duel, a holmgang, to reclaim his honor. He could also take the case of the thing. If he did nothing, he would be tacitly accepting the insult. His career as a skald would be over. No one would respect a poet who allowed himself to be shamed in such a way. The insult Hester, when used in this context, was a high-stakes move. It was verbal poison wrapped in the beauty of poetry, designed to destroy a man's reputation from the inside out. It showed that even in the world of art and literature, the core concepts of Norse honor and masculinity were paramount. Number 13, a coward dies 1,000 times. The word was bleedemeni. It means an unmanly coward, a soft or weak man. It comes from bleedi, meaning cowardice. It was a straightforward but powerful insult. In a warrior society, courage was not just a virtue, it was a basic requirement. A man was expected to stand his ground, to defend his family and his honor, and to face death without flinching. A bleedemeni was a man who failed this fundamental test. The year is 991. The place is the coast of Essex, England. A large force of Norse raiders has landed. Among them is a young man named Magnus on his first raid. He had dreamed of this moment, of the glory and the silver, but the reality was different. It was loud, chaotic, and terrifying. The English feared, the local militia put up a fierce resistance. In the heat of the battle, as the shield walls clashed, Magnus froze. A large, bearded Saxon warrior charged at him, axe raised. Magnus's training, his instincts, everything abandoned him. He dropped his shield and scrambled backward, falling over a wounded comrade. His chieftain, a scarred veteran named Harold, saw it happen, and Harold stepped forward, parried the axe blow, and drove his own sword into the Saxon's chest. The battle moved on, and the Norse were eventually victorious. They gathered on the beach that evening to tend their wounds and divide the loot. Harold stood before the assembled crew. He looked directly at Magnus. "We fought well today," Harold said, his voice cold. "We fought like men, all but one." He pointed his sword at Magnus. "This one!" He dropped his shield. He ran. He shamed himself, and he shamed us. He is a blade of many. The word landed like a stone. It was a formal judgment. Magnus was a coward. The consequences were immediate. He was given no share of the plunder. The other warriors turned their backs on him. He was an outcast. On the long journey home, no one spoke to him. He was forced to do the worst jobs on the ship. Being branded a blade of many was more than just being called a name. It was a permanent stain on a man's reputation. When he returned to his home village, the story would follow him. He would find it hard to marry. No other chieftain would take him on a raid. He had failed the most important test of manhood. The fear of being called a blade of many was a powerful motivator. It pushed men to fight through their fear, to stand in the shield wall, even when they wanted to run. The sagas are full of stories of men who choose certain death over the shame of being seen as a coward. It was better to die a hero than to live as a bleedameni. The insult was a tool for enforcing the warrior code, a verbal whip to keep men in line. Number 12. He is a brute, not a man. The Old Norse word was troll. We know this word as troll, a monster from fairy tales. But in the Old Norse world, it was also a potent insult. To call someone a troll was to say they were not human. It meant they were brutish, savage, malevolent, and operated outside the norms of society. Trolls in the old stories were often strong and dangerous, but they were also stupid, ugly, and lived in dark, wild places. They were the opposite of a good member of the community. Egil Skallagrimsson, the famous 10th century poet and warrior, was a man who often skirted the edge of being a troll. He was incredibly ugly, immensely strong, prone to fits of berserker rage, and had a habit of killing people who offended him. His own father, Skallagrimr, was described as being troll-like. The family was known for its dark moods and unpredictable violence. Imagine a feast in Norway hosted by King Eric Bloodaxe. Egil is a guest. He gets into a dispute with one of the king's men, a man named Barder. They argue over inheritance. The argument escalates. Egil, in a rage, grabs Barder and kills him right there in the king's hall. The hall erupts in chaos. King Eric is furious. His wife, the sorceress Gunhild, looks at Egil with pure hatred. "This man is not a man," she might have said. "He is a troll. He has no respect for law or for the sanctity of a king's hall. He is a monster who should be driven back to the wilderness where he belongs." By calling Egil a troll, Gunhild was doing more than just insulting his appearance or his actions. She was trying to place him outside the bounds of human society. A man can be reasoned with. A man is subject to the law. A troll is a creature of chaos that must be destroyed or driven out. It was a way of dehumanizing an enemy, of marking them as an other who did not deserve the protections and respect afforded to people. The insult could also be used for someone who was just brutish and unpleasant. A farmer who beat his wife, a chieftain who ruled through pure fear, a merchant who was monstrously greedy, any of these could be called a troll. It meant they lacked the finer qualities of humanity reason, honor, community spirit, and self-control. For a man like Egil, who was fiercely proud and sensitive about his ugliness, the insult would have been particularly galling. know, it took his physical characteristics and his fierce temper and wove them into an accusation that he was fundamentally inhuman. It was a powerful way to isolate a person and turn the community against them. Number 11, a glutton's grave is dug with his own teeth. The word is glimmer. It means a glutton, or someone with an insatiable, greedy appetite. But it also carried connotations of being loud, boorish, and unpleasant. It wasn't just about eating too much, it was about a general lack of self-control and refinement that made a person a burden on their community. In a society where food could be scarce, especially during the long Scandinavian winters, gluttony was not a minor vice. It was a serious social failing. A glamour was someone who consumed more than their fair share, who did not respect the needs of the group. Hospitality was a cornerstone of Norse society, but it depended on reciprocity and moderation. Glamour abused that hospitality. The story of the ghost of Glommer in Grettis Saga gives a supernatural dimension to this idea. Glommer was a Swede, a large, loud, and heathen man who was hired by a farmer named Thorhall to be a shepherd. He was a difficult man with a huge appetite and a gloomy disposition. On Yule Eve, he ignored warnings about a monster that haunted the valley. He went out with the sheep and was found the next day dead and horribly mangled, but Glamour did not stay dead. He rose as a Draugr, a powerful undead creature. As a ghost, his gluttonous nature was magnified. He haunted the valley, killing livestock, terrorizing travelers, and driving the people from their homes. He became a physical embodiment of the destructive nature of unchecked appetite. As an insult, calling someone Glommer would tap into this fear. Imagine a winter feast. Resources are limited. One guest, Thorir, is eating and drinking with no thought for others. He grabs the best pieces of meat, drinks horn after horn of ale, and bellows for more. The host, trying to be polite, makes a subtle hint about sharing. Thorir ignores him. Finally, another guest, fed up, might mutter to his neighbor, "Look at Thorir. He is a glamour. He will devour everything in this house and leave nothing but bones." The insult is twofold. It's a direct criticism of Thorir's selfish behavior, but it also carries a sinister undertone, thanks to stories like the one in Grettis Saga. It implies that Thorir's gluttony is not just bad manners, it's a monstrous, almost inhuman trait. It suggests he is a destructive force, a blight on the household. A glummer was not a jolly fat man. He was a social parasite whose insatiable hunger threatened the well-being of the entire community. It was an insult that attacked a person's lack of discipline and their failure to respect the delicate social balance of shared resources. Number 10, he is as useful as a broken axe. This insult isn't a single word, but a concept embodied by the term clamhog. A clamhog was a shame stroke or lewd blow. Legally, it referred to a specific kind of non-lethal but deeply humiliating wound, like cutting off someone's beard or buttocks. Metaphorically, however, the idea of doing something shameful, clumsy, or inept could be seen as a clamhog. It's the action of a fool, a blow that serves no purpose but to bring shame. Think of a group of men building a longship in a Norwegian fjord around the year 900. It is skilled work requiring precision and strength. A young apprentice named Finn is on the crew. He is eager but clumsy. He is tasked with shaping a key timber for the ship's frame. He misjudges a blow with his adze. The tool slips and takes a huge, ugly chunk out of the wood, ruining the piece. The master shipwright, an old, grizzled man named Kveldolf, walks over. He looks at the ruined timber, then at Finn. He doesn't yell, he speaks in a low, disgusted voice. "That was a clamhog, boy. A shame stroke. You have not just wasted good timber. You have shamed the work. An axe in your hands is a dangerous thing, mostly to the wood. You are as useful as a broken blade." The insult is devastating. Kveldolf is not just criticizing a single mistake. He is calling Finn's entire contribution shameful and incompetent. A clamhog is a blow that is not only ineffective, but also ridiculous. It brings dishonor. Finn has not just failed at his task, he has made himself look like a fool. His action was the physical equivalent of a stupid, embarrassing comment. This concept could be applied to any situation. A warrior who trips over his own feet in a fight and gets his helmet knocked off might be said to have suffered a clam hog. A speaker at the thing who makes a foolish legal argument that gets him laughed at has delivered a verbal clam hog. It's a powerful insult because it targets competence. In a world where your skills as a warrior, a farmer, a craftsman, a sailor use were essential to your survival and your status, being labeled as someone whose actions are shameful and inept was a serious blow to your reputation. Or it suggested you were a liability to any group you were a part of. The shame of the clam hog was the shame of utter clumsy failure. Number 9, a woman who rides in the evening. The term was veldrida, which translates to evening rider or night rider. This was not a compliment. A geldrida was a witch, a hag, a female monster who rode through the night, often causing nightmares or bringing misfortune. To call a woman this was one of the most serious and dangerous insults possible. It was an accusation of practicing malevolent magic. In the Norse world, magic cider was a real and feared force. While some forms of magic were respected, cider was often seen as dark and manipulative, and its practice by women could be viewed with deep suspicion. An accusation of being a veldrida was not just name-calling, it could lead to a woman being ostracized or even killed. The saga of King Rolf Kraki contains a character who embodies this archetype, the half-elf Queen Skuld. She used magic and an army of undead warriors in her attempt to overthrow her half-brother King Hrolf. She was a veldrida in spirit, a woman who used dark arts for her own malevolent ends. Let's imagine a more ordinary scene. In a small Icelandic village around 1050, two women, Helga and Ingrid, are rivals. They are neighbors, and their families have been in a long-standing feud over grazing rights. One of Ingrid's sheep dies suddenly. She is distraught and angry. She sees Helga in the village market the next day. Helga is an older woman, a widow who keeps to herself and knows a great deal about herbs. She is considered a bit strange. Ingrid, in her grief and anger, points a trembling finger at Helga. "You did this," she shouts, for all to hear. "My best ewe is dead. It was fine yesterday. You are a kveldrida. You ride the night and bring evil to good folk. You cursed my flock." The market falls silent. This is a terrifying accusation. Ingrid is accusing Helga of witchcraft, of being a creature of the night who preys on her neighbors. This is not a simple insult like calling someone ugly or stupid. It is an accusation that Helga is an enemy of the community, a servant of dark forces. The consequences for Helga could be dire. Her neighbors would shun her, people would cross the path to avoid her. They would blame every misfortune, a sick cow, a bad harvest, a child's fever on her. The accusation, even if unproven, would poison her life. If more misfortunes followed, the community might decide to take action, driving her out or worse. The insult veldrida was a weapon, and a very dangerous one. It played on the deepest fears of the community, fear of the unknown of magic, and of the hidden evil that could lurk behind a neighbor's face. Here, it was a word used to turn a woman into a monster. Number 8, a fly of the magical wind. This is a more obscure but wonderfully poetic insult, gandfluga. A gander was a magical object, often a staff used by sorcerers or the magical force itself. A fluga is a fly. So a gandfluga is a magic fly or sorcerer's fly. It was another term for a witch or a malevolent magical practitioner. It implied that the person was a pest, a buzzing, annoying creature that carried a payload of evil magic. This insult likely comes from the belief that sorcerers could send out their spirits in the form of animals or insects to do their bidding. This was a part of satyr magic. To call someone a gandfluga was to accuse them of sending out their spirit to spy on people, to cause trouble, or to work curses. The scene could be a chieftain's hall late at night. The chieftain, Bjorn, has been suffering from a strange wasting sickness. The local healer can find no cause. Bjorn's wife, Sigrid, has a long-standing hatred for a woman in a nearby valley named Thora. Thora is a seeress, a Volva, whose powers are both respected and feared. Sigrid is convinced Thora is behind Bjorn's illness. She sits by her husband's bed. It is her work, she whispers to Bjorn's brother, Hakon. It is Thora. She has always been jealous of our family's standing. She is a Gondfluga. She sends her filthy spirit here at night, buzzing in the rafters, poisoning your brother as he sleeps. She is a pest, a carrier of magical disease. The imagery is powerful. It turns Thora from a respected, if feared, seeress into something small, disgusting, and insidious. A fly is a creature of filth. It is hard to catch. It gets everywhere. By calling her a Gondfluga, Sigrid is painting her as a persistent, unseen, and unclean magical threat. It's a less direct, but perhaps more insidious accusation than Veldrida. It doesn't just say witch, it says magical vermin. This insult was effective because it mixed the supernatural with the mundane. Everyone knew what a fly was. Everyone found them annoying. By attaching that common experience to the terrifying concept of magic, the insult made the threat feel more real and more personal. It was a way of saying, this person is not just evil, they are a filthy, buzzing nuisance who is secretly infesting our lives with their dark arts. It was an insult designed to create a sense of creeping dread and disgust. Number 7. He is a thrall in his heart. The word was thrall. It meant thrall, or slave. This was not in itself an insult. It was a legal and social status. A significant portion of the population in the Norse world were thralls. They were property, with no rights, and could be bought, sold, or killed by their owners. However, to call a free man a thrall was a grave insult. It was an attack on his fundamental identity and his place in the world. The social structure was paramount. At the top were the chieftains and wealthy landowners, jarls. In the middle were the free farmers, the backbone of society, carls. At the bottom were the thralls. Their freedom was the defining characteristic of a carl. He had the right to own land, to bear arms, to speak at the thing, and to seek redress for wrongs done to him. To suggest he was a thrall was to deny him all of that. Let's go to the Althing in Iceland, the great annual assembly in the year 980. A man named Thorstein is arguing a case against his more powerful neighbor Einar. Thorstein is a free farmer, but not a wealthy one. Einar is trying to claim a piece of Thorstein's land. Thorstein presents his case clearly, citing the law. Einar, seeing that the argument might be going against him, decides to resort to personal attack. He stands up and laughs. "Listen to this man," Einar says to the assembled crowd. He speaks of rights and laws, but look at him. He works his land like a beast of burden. His hands are rough, his back is bent. He has the mind of a thrall, content with his little patch of dirt, afraid of his betters. He is a thrall in his heart, even if he walks free. The insult is a calculated blow. Einar is trying to reframe the entire dispute. He is suggesting that Thorstein does not have the standing of a true freeman. By calling him a thrall in spirit, he is implying that Thorstein is naturally subordinate, that he should not be challenging a superior man like Einar. It's a form of social bullying, an attempt to use class prejudice to win a legal argument. For Thorstein, this is an attack on his very being. His freedom is his most precious possession. The insult implies he is servile, cowardly, and without the pride and independence expected of a carl. It suggests that he does not deserve his freedom. He would have to challenge this insult forcefully, perhaps by demanding a retraction or even challenging Einar to a duel, to prove that he had the spirit of a free man, not a thrall. The word thrall, when aimed at a free man, was an attempt to verbally enslave him. Number 6, a man who is all talk and no trousers. The insult is blodder. It means soft, weak, effeminate, or cowardly. It is another term that falls under the umbrella of ergi, the great unmanly insult. While ragger or arger had a more specific sexual connotation, blotter was a more general attack on a man's masculinity. It suggested he was soft, indecisive, and lacked the necessary hardness and aggression to be a proper man. The Laxdæla saga provides a powerful example of this insult in action. The story revolves around the love triangle of Gudrun, Kjartan, and Bolli. Gudrun, a famously proud and strong-willed woman, marries Bolli after she believes Kjartan has slighted her. Years later, her resentment and pride lead her to push Bolli into a confrontation with his cousin and foster brother, Kjartan. Bolli is hesitant. He loves Kjartan. He does not want to fight him, but Gudrun will not let it go. One morning, as Bolli lies in bed, Gudrun comes to him. She taunts him. She questions his courage. She tells him that if he will not act against Kjartan, then she and her sons will see him as worthless. She effectively calls him blotter, soft, and unmanly. In one famous scene, she tells him that he and his men are more like daughters than warriors, concerned only with looking good and staying home. As she says, you would have been better suited to be a daughter of your father and to have been married off. It is a brutal and emasculating speech. She is telling her husband that he is failing at his role as a man, that he is too soft to defend her honor. This pressure works, goaded by Gudrun's insults and the fear of being seen as blotter. Bolli finally agrees to ambush Kjartan. The confrontation leads to Kjartan's death, a tragedy that haunts Bolli for the rest of his life. The insult bloater was a powerful tool for social manipulation, especially for women who could not typically use physical violence themselves. By questioning a man's masculinity, a woman like Gudrun could incite him to action. The fear of being seen as soft or weak was so profound that a man might choose to commit a terrible act of violence rather than live with the shame of being called bloater. It was an insult that struck at the core of a man's self-image and his role in a society that prized strength and decisive action above all else. Number 5, a fool's mouth is his own undoing. The word is fifth. It means fool, idiot, or simpleton. It's a simple, direct insult, but its power lay in its bluntness. In a society that valued cunning, cleverness, and a sharp wit, especially in legal matters and poetry, being called a fifth was a total dismissal of a person's mental faculties. It meant you were not to be taken seriously. The Poetic Edda, in the poem Havamal, the sayings of the High One, gives a lot of advice on how not to be a fool. The poem, attributed to the god Odin, is a collection of proverbs and wisdom. It repeatedly warns against foolish behavior. For example, it advises a guest to be observant and quiet, because a fill is a man who talks too much and reveals his own ignorance. A foolish man thinks he will live forever if he keeps away from fighting, but old age won't grant him a truce even if the spears do. This verse captures the essence of the fifth. The fool's thinking is shallow and short-sighted. He makes bad decisions based on a poor understanding of the world. Let's set a scene at a feast. A young warrior named Stein is bragging loudly about his exploits. He is exaggerating his role in a recent battle, claiming kills that belong to others. He is also drinking heavily. An older, respected warrior, Rolf, is listening with a look of weary contempt. Stein starts to boast about how he will single-handedly conquer a piece of land belonging to a notoriously dangerous chieftain. I will take his farm by spring, Stein declares, sloshing his ale. He is an old man. His men are weak. Hrolf finally speaks, his voice quiet, but carrying across the table. You are a fiffle, Stein. The word cuts through the drunken haze. Stein is taken aback. What did you call me? Rolf shakes his head slowly. You are a fool. You talk of things you do not understand. You underestimate your enemies and overestimate yourself. You broadcast your plans to anyone who will listen. A wise man holds his tongue and sharpens his sword. A fiefly sharpens his tongue and lets his sword rust. Your mouth will lead you to your grave. The insult is not just calling Stein stupid. It is a diagnosis of his character. It says he lacks wisdom, foresight, and self-control. It is a public judgment from an experienced man that this young braggart is a liability. The other warriors at the table would now look at Stein differently. His boasts would seem hollow. Rolf's judgment has marked him as a fool. someone not to be relied upon in a serious situation. The word fifth was a simple but effective way of deflating a person's ego and destroying their credibility. And number 4, he has the moral compass of a fleeing thief. The word is skraeling. This is a fascinating and controversial term. It was the word the Norse used to describe the native peoples they encountered in Greenland and North America, Vinland. Its exact meaning is debated. It might mean screecher or shooter, referring to their war cries. A more likely theory is that it comes from the Old Norse word skra, meaning dried skin, and that skraeling meant one who wears animal skins. Regardless of its origin, it was used as a derogatory term. It was a word for an outsider, a savage, a barbarian. To the Norse, the Skraelings were a strange and often hostile people. They were not part of the Norse world of law, honor, and kinship. To call a fellow Norseman a Skraeling would have been a strange but powerful insult. It would be accusing them of being a savage, of not belonging to the culture. Imagine a trading dispute in the Greenland settlement in the 12th century. 2 Norse farmers, Eric and Leif, are arguing over the ownership of a piece of driftwood, a valuable commodity in the treeless landscape. Not Eric had found it on the shore, but Leif claims it washed up on his section of the beach. The argument gets heated. Leif, who is known for his, sharp dealing and for cutting corners, grabs the piece of wood and starts to drag it away. Eric is outraged. Stop. We agreed to take this to the law speaker. You cannot just take it. Leif spits on the ground. The law is for men who have time for talk. I have work to do. Eric looks at him with utter contempt. You have no honor. You act like a Skraeling. You don't respect agreements. You take what you want like a wild man. You are not a true Norseman. You are a savage living among us. This would be a deep and unusual insult. Eric is not just calling Leif a thief, he is excommunicating him from their shared culture. He is saying that Leif's behavior is so dishonorable, so outside the norms of their society, that he is no better than the savages they look down upon. It's an attack on his very identity. The insult would imply that Leif is untrustworthy, uncivilized, and perhaps not even fully human in a cultural sense. It would be a way of saying you do not belong here. Your actions prove that you are not one of us. In the small, isolated community of Greenland, such an accusation of being a cultural and moral outsider would have been a powerful and alienating blow. Number 3, a man who cannot hold his liquor, cannot hold his tongue. The term here is Oljorn, which means ale eager, or fond of ale. On its own, it might not be a serious insult. The Norse certainly enjoyed their drink. However, when used with contempt, it implied a drunkard, a man who lacked self-control and was ruled by his thirst. This was a serious character flaw. The Havamal has much to say about the dangers of excessive drinking. It warns that ale can steal a man's wits. Less good than they say for the sons of men is the drinking of ale. The more a man drinks, the less he knows of his own mind. A man who was Oljorn was not just a man who liked to party, he was a man who could not be trusted. He was likely to get into pointless fights, make foolish promises, or, worst of all, reveal secrets. In a world of feuds and shifting alliances, a loose tongue could be fatal. The scene is a council of war. A chieftain is planning a surprise raid on a rival's settlement. He goes over the plan with his most trusted warriors. One of them, Svein, is a fierce fighter, but has a well-known weakness for mead. After the plan is laid out, the chieftain looks directly at Svein. This plan depends on secrecy. No one outside this room can know. Do you understand, Svein? Another warrior, Ulf, who distrusts Svein, speaks up. Is it wise to trust Svein with such a secret, my lord? He is Olgorn. One horn of ale too many, and he will be boasting of our great raid to every serving girl in the hall. The accusation hangs in the air. Ulf is not questioning Svein's courage or his loyalty. He is attacking his discipline. He is calling him a drunk, a man whose appetites make him a liability. It's a pragmatic insult based on a real and dangerous character flaw. Svein would be deeply offended. His honor is being questioned. He is being called unreliable, a weak link in the chain. He would have to defend himself, perhaps by swearing a solemn oath not to drink until after the raid. But the damage is done. The chieftain and the other warriors will now be watching him with suspicion. To be known as Uljorn was to be marked as a man of poor judgment and weak will. In a society that valued control both on the battlefield and in the hall, it was a label that could severely limit a man's opportunities and the trust placed in him by his peers. Number 2, his words are the weavings of a spider. This is not a single Old Norse word, but a concept that fits their worldview. The idea of a man whose words are treacherous, designed to trap the unwary. A good candidate for a term embodying this would be related to Loki, the trickster god, the master of lies and deceit. To be compared to Loki was to be called a cunning, silver-tongued, and utterly untrustworthy manipulator. Loki was the ultimate source of trouble in the Norse myths. His clever words started feuds, led to the death of the god Balder, and would ultimately bring about Ragnarok, the end of the world. He was not a fool or a brute. He was intelligent, charming, and persuasive. That's what made him so dangerous. Let's imagine a legal case at the Gulating, a major assembly in western Norway. A man named Orm is trying to talk his way out of paying a debt to a widow named Astrid. Orm is known for his clever speech. He twists the facts, misrepresents the original agreement, and tries to make Astrid look greedy and foolish. He is a master of verbal manipulation. Astrid, seeing her case slipping away, finally has enough. She stands before the law speaker and the assembled men. She points at Orm. "Do not listen to him," she says, her voice ringing with conviction. "His tongue is honeyed, but his heart is poison. His words are not truth, they are the weavings of a spider, designed to ensnare the honest. He speaks like Loki, full of clever tricks and empty of honor. He would talk a bird from a tree and then wring its neck. He is a liar, and his promises are worthless." By comparing Orm to Loki and his words to a spider's web, Astrid is not just calling him a liar. She is warning everyone that he is a specific kind of danger. He is a social predator. He uses the tools of society, language, law, persuasion, not to build trust, but to destroy it for his own gain. The insult is powerful because it acknowledges the man's intelligence. It doesn't call him a fool. It calls him a clever, malicious deceiver. It warns the community that this man's greatest weapon is his mind and his mouth, and that he uses them for evil. It's an accusation of profound moral corruption. To be likened to Loki was to be marked as an enemy from within, a force of chaos and betrayal who threatened the very fabric of trust that held society together. Number 1, he is a man in name only. This brings us back to the most potent category of all insults in the Old Norse world, Ergi, Arg, or Rager, the accusation of being unmanly. This was the nuclear option of insults. It was an attack on a man's core identity, his social standing, and his honor, all at once. As we saw in the introduction, it was one of the few insults that legally justified an immediate, violent response. Why was this so powerful? In Norse society, the roles of men and women were strictly defined. Men were expected to be active, aggressive, and dominant. They were the warriors, the farmers, the traders, the leaders. A man's honor, drengskapre, was tied to his ability to fulfill this role. The concept of ergi accused a man of willingly taking the passive, receptive role, which was culturally coded as female. It wasn't just an insult, it was an accusation of gender betrayal. It was saying, you are a man in body, but a woman in spirit. You have abandoned your fundamental nature. The Egil saga contains a scene where this type of insult is used to devastating effect. Egil Skallagrimson has a feud with King Eric Bloodaxe and his wife Gunhild. After being driven from Norway, Egil performs a powerful ritual of scorn. He erects a nidstong or scorn pole. He takes a horse's head, places it on top of a pole, and points it towards the land, cursing the land spirits to drive out the king and queen. As part of this curse, he speaks powerful, insulting words. While the saga doesn't record the exact words, this type of formal, magical curse was often where the most potent insults, including accusations of ergi, would be deployed. The goal was to magically and spiritually unman his enemy, to destroy his honor and his luck. Let's picture a final, simpler scene. Two men in a hall after a dispute. One, in a final, desperate burst of rage, shouts the word Rhaegar at the other. The word itself is the story. The immediate silence, the sudden tension, the hands dropping to sword hilts. There is no clever wordplay here, no complex metaphor. It is a raw, direct, and unforgivable assault. The man who was insulted has no choice. The law and the code of honor demand action. If he walks away, he is finished. He accepts the label. His name is Mud. He will be a laughingstock, a man without honor. He must fight. He might die, but it is better to die defending his honor than to live without it. This is the ultimate lesson of Old Norse insults. And they were not just words. They were social acts with real, immediate, and often violent consequences. They were tools for enforcing social norms, for destroying reputations, and for challenging a person's place in the world. The word Rhaegar was the most powerful because it did not just insult what a man did, it insulted what he was. Or it declared him a man in name only, an empty shell who had failed the most basic test of his existence.